So, should the UK double its Afghan refugee intake? To debate this now, Steve Valdez-Symonds, Director of Amnesty UK's Refugee and Migrant Rights Programme, who says we need to up the numbers and ensure Afghans are granted settled status in the UK. But Benjamin Loughnane, Research Fellow at conservative think tank The Bow Group, says we need limits in order to keep tabs on exactly who is entering the country. So, Steve, why do you think we need more? We're taking 20,000. Why do we need more?
Well, let's be a bit more precise, actually. What Amnesty has called for is greater urgency with an evacuation right now. What we're concerned about is the resettlement programme is something for the future. Hopefully it will start soon. And it's about 20,000 people over several years. And yes, we would like to see more done. But what we're most concerned about is what is happening right now. People are stuck, including very many people who are at immediate risk from what has happened. Those people need a safe place to get out. And what we have been saying is that that's where the focus immediately needs to be. And yes, that does need to be upscaled to make sure that people get out to safety.
So how many? Let's talk numbers, though, because that matters, doesn't it?
Of course it will matter and lives will depend upon it. But I have to say that you referred to Tom Tugendhat's speech earlier. He's right about the idea of this not being a political auction. Quite frankly, the situation right now is purely about capacity, how long that capacity will stay in place and the resources available to literally get people out. But they need to be eligible.
But are you not worried about that, Steve? Because that means that anyone who can get to Kabul airport, essentially, gets out. But that doesn't seem fair or right, and there's no process behind that. What about folk who are in need across the rest of the country?
Well, the reality, I'm afraid, for folk across the rest of the country right now is that there's nothing available to them. The situation in Kabul is that there are certainly people that can be identified. There are prominent women. There are human rights defenders. There are journalists. There are people who are at particular risk for the Taliban. And the UK should be, with others, leading efforts to make sure that they are among the numbers who are able to get out on these evacuations.
Look, let me bring Benjamin Loughnane in. Benjamin, Steve from Amnesty UK says this is a crisis, this is an emergency. We should take everyone at this point. Why is he wrong?
Well, I have every sympathy with people who say that we should be taking in refugees because obviously the scenes in Afghanistan are horrific. But at the end of the day, this was not our war. This was America's war. We got involved with because we are an ally of America. But if anyone should be taking refugees, it should be America. They have far greater resources than us. They're a far larger country. We are a small island. And taking in, arbitrary numbers of refugees just to score political points is not a good policy. It's not sensible.
Do you think 20,000 is too many then?
I think 20,000 is an arbitrary figure. Whether it's too many or too little is what's going to be argued about for the next few months. But fundamentally, I in anywhere near that number because it's a policy which has been designed entirely to seem compassionate and to seem charitable without actually thinking through what it actually means. It affects the people who are already here, including refugees themselves, including immigrants who live here. It's a really disastrous policy for a country so small who had such a limited involvement in Afghanistan compared to America, whose war it really was.
So Steve, Benjamin says, look, this is the US responsibility. And by the way, it's their withdrawal that's created this mess. So he's right, isn't he?
I'm afraid he's scoring political points at the expense of Afghans who are at serious risk now. I mean, he's right that everybody should be playing their part, and certainly the Americans should be doing so. But every country needs to come together to provide safety for as many people as possible. I'm not calling for an arbitrary number. Amnesty's not doing that. We are calling urgently for as much as can be done. A resettlement programme over some years for 20,000 people, quite frankly, is a relatively small number of people. But we certainly support that. But the focus right now has to be getting the people who are at most at risk, and they can be identified, if they can be reached, out of the country. And everybody should be playing their part in that.
Benjamin, isn't one of the issues that we have this crisis, this immigration or illegal refugee crisis going on in the Channel, and as a result, we don't have our immigration numbers under our control at all at the moment. So actually what needs to be sorted is the emergency on the Channel, so then we can take our legitimate pool of refugees from Afghanistan.
Oh yeah, our asylum policy is absolutely disastrous, and the recent move to say anyone coming from Afghanistan doesn't need to prove that they're from Afghanistan, they don't need passports or papers or anything that say where they're from. All that does is write a blank cheque to anyone coming over the Channel to say the three magic words of "I'm from Afghanistan," and then they don't face any sort of background checks or whatever to know where they might actually be from. But fundamentally what Steve said was that we need to do as much as possible. Afghanistan is a country of 38 million people. Where do you draw the line? What number is too high? We are an island. We are a country of around 65 million people. Could we take all 38 million? Or just 30 million? Or just 15 million? Or just 10 million? Or just a million? Or just... Where do you draw the line?
What is the number where you say it is enough is enough? 100,000, 500,000? There has to be a figure, surely.
Okay, I'll try this again. Okay, we have a very short window of emergency flights, which obviously have a limit on what their capacity is ever going to be. The sorts of numbers that were just mentioned have no reality. We have literally probably days of a few flights getting people out. We should do as much as possible in that time.
But Steve, I'm talking about after the emergency situation.
And beyond that, as I've said, 20,000 people is a relatively modest number. I'm not making grand claims about anything more than that. I'm just pointing out that 20,000 people resettled over a period of several years would make a modest contribution to resettling Afghans. And can I please also make some other point about the issue of the Channel crossings, which you mentioned just before I got cut off. We've not seen any increase in the numbers of people over the last couple of years entering our asylum system. We have seen people coming by a different route, but numbers have not gone up. So can we please get back to reality? We have a modest situation with asylum in this country, and we certainly could be doing much more in relation to resettlement. So I welcome the announcement.
Shaking your head at that. Why?
Yeah, I think it's absolutely farcical to suggest that asylum claims or entrance into the asylum system haven't increased. I mean, firstly, we've got a backlog of 150,000. The asylum system in this country is severely broken. It's designed in such a way that it's attractive to people who want to come here and game the system. And we have seen the numbers in the Channel go from around 1,000 in 2019 up to 9,000 in 2020, up to almost 30,000 this year. The numbers are very clearly increasing. Just because you've got this idea that, oh, they must have been coming in via different routes previously, that doesn't bear any reality. We can see what's happening. We can see the boats absolutely chock full coming across the Channel. People aren't stupid. They can see the numbers increasing.
Steve, can I ask you about the concerns from security experts that if we're not conducting the same sort of rigorous background checks and passport checks, it would be possible for the Taliban to actually send their operatives easily to the UK in order for them to set up sleeper terrorist cells here? Do you have any concern about that, and is there a way around that from your position?
I understand the need for security checks. Of course, they will have to be conducted, and I'm sure that they are. But we can still identify prominent people who it's clear are at risk. And I'm sorry, I can't let this go. The asylum numbers that enter the UK system are published every quarter. If you care to look at the numbers, you will see that they reduced last year, not increased. They have not gone up. Yes, more people have come by this particular route across the Channel. It would help if we talked about facts.
The facts are there have been 10,000 migrant crossings already this year via the Channel, and that's more than the entirety of last year. So that's a crisis.
It's not more than the entirety of people claiming asylum. That's what I'm saying. Fewer people last year claimed asylum in this country than the year before, albeit that the numbers of people crossing the Channel last year substantially increased. Yes, COVID has changed the routes that people use, but into the last the last numbers that we have for entering this country's asylum system, the numbers have still not gone up. So let's not exaggerate, because yes, far more people have crossed the channel.
10,000 illegal crossings on the channel. And by the way, that are only the ones that we know about, Steve. You must concede that that is a humanitarian crisis. I mean, these folk are in danger, if nothing else, from your perspective.
It's absolutely a crisis for every single one of those people who put themselves in danger on those journeys.
Well, and for this country, though.
Sorry?
And
it's not a humanitarian crisis for this country. Come on. Please, if you go and see the numbers of people
arriving by boats illegally, where they're encouraging people smuggling operations. I mean, I think most Brits would think that is a serious humanitarian crisis.
How do you think that people escape persecution anywhere else in the world
they're in France,
if they don't cross borders?
They're in France. They're coming from France.
France, which hosts a population 4 times the number in its asylum system. Some people cannot get in, and some people have family here. They're perfectly entitled to come here to their claims rather than France.
But you must accept that the more illegal crossings there are, the less opportunity there is going to be to take genuine refugees from places like Afghanistan, and that's what should concern you.
I'm sorry, I don't accept that. And genuine refugees, as you put it, cross the channel. The position also has been, yes,
not
some,
all,
but
not all. Many are economic migrants.
With respect,
who've paid £20,000 to people smuggling gangs.
The great majority of people who cross the channel are found to be refugees when they get into the system. Okay. Those are the facts. If you want to talk about the facts, look at the data. It's published. I spend a lot of time checking that because it's important to my work. That is the reality, and many of those people who've created these crossings are Afghan refugees. And the reason they do these things is there are no visas for them. So all they've got is these journeys. France receives people like this, as do many, many other countries. We actually receive far fewer people than any comparable country in Europe, and far, far fewer people than countries like Pakistan and Iran, who are hosting millions of refugees. We should and can do our bit, including recognising people's rights to cross borders into our asylum system, which needs to remain open to people.
A fascinating and impassioned debate. Thank you so much for having it. That was Steve Valdez-Symonds, Amnesty UK Refugee and Migrant Rights Programme Director. And before that, Benjamin Loughnane from the Conservative think tank The Bow Group. Thank you so much.